Hi, I'm Linda Pacini, and as training manager for Baby Lock, I get asked the question all the time, why would I ever want a serger? Well, the answer I give in most instances is because this is like the most efficient piece of equipment you could ever put in your sewing room. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If you're a garment sewer, you probably already know that sometimes you buy fabric that looks like this. It's all frayed on the side, but when you run it through a serger, it totally cleans your fabric up. No more frayed edges, and it looks super professional. I absolutely love this technique, and you can use it on any fabric. Now, the other thing about sergers too is that they're not just for lightweight fabrics. In fact, you can use some pretty beefy denim if you need to. And so this is what this looks like. And I can even go through 4 layers. Your serger should be able to finish edges just like this and look perfect, balanced tensions all the time, no adjustments on my part. And that's one of the benefits of a Baby Lock serger. They don't need any adjusting because the magic is all built within. Let me show you some other features that I really love. I like to sew on knits, and one of the biggest reasons why I bought a serger is I wanted to be able to make some clothing of my own, and I got tired of my stitches popping. Well, when you're doing knits, that's not going to happen. I'm going to be lining up my ribbing along with my knit fabric to create the perfect finish for a neckline. So you probably recognize this. It looks just like the top of a t-shirt that you might buy at the store or make for yourself. But the big bonus, of course, is that when you sew on a serger, stretching these seams mean you'll never hear any of that popping that typically comes when you sew something together on a sewing machine with knits. You can stretch it, and you won't get any pop stitches. That's a real bonus. So I hope you're starting to see a little bit what a serger can do. Let me show you something really fun that most people don't think of when they think of a serger, and that's gathering fabric. 2 little adjustments on my machine. Changing my stitch length along with engaging my differential feed means that I'm going to get beautiful gathers. Look at how pretty that is. And the bonus is, if you take your threads here at this edge and stretch them out, the 2 shortest threads are going to be my needle threads. And to gain additional gathers, all I have to do is pull on that thread, and I can gather up my fabric even more. So now you can get even better than a 2-to-1 ratio when you're making your garments. So for somebody who likes to do home decor, this is the perfect finish for putting ruffles on the edge of a pillow, or maybe even finishing your quilt that way. And for garment sewers, you already know you can do yards and yards of ruffles without having to really break a sweat at all. And that was fast, wasn't it? Now I'm going to put my differential feed back down, and did you know that you can actually apply elastic to fabrics like Lycra and do it all in one fell swoop? It's simple and easy to do on a serger. My fabric is perfectly finished and ready to top stitch in order to be able to finish off the waistline or maybe even the top of a skirt or swimwear. And now I'm going to make a couple little adjustments and show you how easy it is to make my machine go into a 3-thread serge, which is where I can start doing some more creative stitching. I'm simply going to remove one of my needles. I'm going to cut my thread up at the top. And now when I pull it out, it takes my needle out with it, and I'm ready for another technique. We're going to go back to some Lycra again, and I'm going to do a really very stretchy stitch using just a narrow 3-thread. So this is a beautiful finish, especially if you want to do swimwear or something that you don't want the threads to take up that much bulk, meaning you don't want your seam finish to be that wide. I really like this stitch when I'm doing sheer fabrics and I might be able to see a little bit of my seam allowance through the garment. Perfect stitch to turn to. And now let me show you probably the only stitch that you never could even come close to replicating on a regular sewing machine, and that is the narrow rolled hem. And on a baby lock serger, it's the easiest thing to set up. So follow along with me because it's going to go fast. I'm going to take my stitch selector, I'm going to click it down one little notch, I'm going to change my stitch length because I have what's called an automatic narrow rolled hem. And one little adjustment more, I'm changing my stitch blade width. And now I'm going to take the piece of fabric that I gathered earlier and we're going to run this through and finish this off. This beautiful finish is exactly what a lot of ready-to-wear has as the finish hem on formal gowns, and you might even recognize it as something that's frequently done on the edges of tablecloths or on dinner napkins. There are a lot of uses for a narrow rolled hem, even if you're making your own wedding veils. I love this stitch because it encases the edge of my fabric and it looks absolutely beautiful. And now, with one other little adjustment here, I can do one of my other final stitches. This is a stitch that's even finer than one I did before, and the other part that's fabulous about it, it's what it looks like when you buy a silk scarf when it's finished. You'll see what I mean in a second. I'm just going to make my stitch length a little bit longer for my second pass. Looks like the edge of a silk scarf to me. So there you have it. These are probably the most commonly used stitches when somebody's talking about an overlock machine. But if you've been paying close attention to what I've been doing, you probably noticed that the only threads to this point that I've used so far are my light green threads. And probably you're wondering, why would I have an additional 4 threads on my machine? Well, this is our top of the line Triumph, which means that it has all the capability that any baby lock serger would have. And I know that that means that we have cover and chain stitch capability also in that machine. And if you don't know what that means, stick around because I'm going to show you that in just a second. Now I'm set up and ready to show you what a cover stitch looks like. So I'm sure you're curious, and this is a stitch that you probably see all the time on knit garments. You just didn't know how it was done at the factory level. So here we go. So perfect stitch for finishing hems. And now let me show you something you probably didn't know that you could do, because with your cover hem, you can actually gather. I'm just engaging my differential feed. So gathering fabric like this using a cover and chain stitch means that there's a lot of creative uses. If you took your threads and you stitched on both edges of your fabric, you could create a stitch that was gathered on both sides, and that's typically used in heirloom sewing if you're creating a puffing strip. Now, we had a knit shirt earlier, and as I said before, having your machine be able to do a cover hem is a great way to be able to finish off a knit shirt. What I love about this machine is that on the toe of the foot, there's a bunch of different little notches which line up with my needles, and I'm just going to feel underneath my fabric. That's a beautiful finish, and I know that you can do this on a sewing machine, but the difference is you don't get any of the channeling that would happen with the twin needle. Plus, when you stretch it, your stitches don't pop. And now for my fabric that I said earlier, once I'd put the elastic in it, that you could finish it off, and this is the stitch we're going to use. And again, I'm just going to fold my fabric over my elastic, and this time I'm going to stitch from the right side of my fabric so I can see where my needles land. So that's a quick finish for any type of swimwear or any type of garments that you're making with Lycra. And now I can actually take my machine and remove one of the needles. I set this up as a wide cover stitch. You can also make it a narrow stitch, but what I want to do now is take it down to a single needle. So now with just a single needle and my chain looper, I have what would be a serger equivalent of a straight stitch. This is what this stitch looks like. So this is a very functional stitch, and it's especially pretty when you use a decorative thread in your chain looper. There's so much to know about sergers, and they can enhance any type of sewing that you're doing. Check out your Baby Lock retailer, see one of their serger professionals, and see what a serger can do for your sewing.